Hi, everyone. Welcome to Queering the South, LGBTQ plus writers on home, love, and history. Thank you to our sponsors for this panel at Sternberg, Nakari, and White, LLC, the lawyers for everything you need in New Orleans. I am so excited about this one. If you're liking what you're seeing so far, please don't forget to hit that donate button. You can click the URL. You can PayPal wordsandmusicnola@gmail.com, or you can text WAM20, WAM20 to 44321. Every dollar that we raise in proceeds goes to funding our year-round community literacy initiatives to help the 27% of New Orleanians who are functionally illiterate. So these 4 days serve our community all day long, and we are so happy to be a part of it. Without further ado, I'm going to say one more thing, and that is please do not forget to go to our bookseller, powered by Tubby and Coos. And thank you also to poets and writers and the Hearst Foundation, who are also playing a role in supporting this panel. Last but not least, I am going to welcome Brad Richard, who will be our moderator for this session. Is an amazing poet, a teacher, a friend, a board member. Brad is all the things, and we're so happy that he agreed to curate this for us. If you guys have questions for the panelists as you go, please don't forget to put them in the comments, and Brad will read them at the end. They'll appear on the screen. Take it away, Brad.
Thank you, Megan. It's so great to be here. Thanks, One Book, One New Orleans, for doing this. And I want to offer my own special shout out to Candace Huber, owner of Tubby and Coos Mid-City Bookshop, and also the tech guru for this event, who made sure that I got in here. So yes, welcome to Queering the South. And I am going to introduce our panelists, and then we will each read a little bit from our work. I've got some questions for us to chat about, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So I would first like to introduce Matthew Draughter, who is a poet, producer, and filmmaker born and raised in New Orleans. Through living in Paris, Chicago, San Francisco, and Portland, Oregon, he has explored the world and used those experiences to create stories and work that brings communities together. His work spans topics of race, sexuality, and masculinity, often through queer, Afrocentric lenses. Next, with roots in Belgium and Sierra Leone, M'Bilia Meekers is a queer Black poet from New Orleans. With an MFA from New York University, she has received fellowships from Cave Canem, Poets and Writers, and The Watering Hole. Her verse has previously appeared in The New Yorker, Best New Poets, Fog Lifter, Guernica, and more. She lives currently in Seattle, Washington. Next, Megan Volpert, who is author or editor of over a dozen books on popular culture, including 2 Lambda Literary Award finalists and an American Library Association honoree. She won Georgia Author of the Year for her newest book, Boss Broad, from Sibling Rivalry Press. And she has been teaching public high school English in Atlanta for over a decade and was 2014 Teacher of the Year. She writes for Pop Matters and has edited anthologies of philosophical essays on the music of Tom Petty and the television series RuPaul's Drag Race. So welcome, Megan. And finally, me. I'm Brad Richard. I've published 4 collections of poetry, including Motion Studies, Butcher's Sugar, and Parasite Kingdom. I taught creative writing to talented high school students in New Orleans for 28 years. And I'm now an instructor for the Kenyon Review's Writers Workshop for Teachers and for New Orleans Writers Workshop. with Elizabeth Gross, who happens to be this year's poetry winner in the Words and Music Literary Competition. I also curate The Waves, an occasional LGBTQ plus reading series, which after a long hiatus is going to be rebooting in January of 2021. Let's get right to hearing you folks reading your wonderful words. And let's start with Matthew Draughter.
Hi. The poems I'm going to be reading to you guys today are going to be coming from my upcoming manuscript called This Cosmos Promised Land. So we're going to talk about love, and then we're going to talk about New Orleans, and then we'll talk about love. The first poem I want to read is called Celestial Unnamed. Last night, I dreamed the longest dream I've ever dreamed. I smeared your face across Mars all the way to Venus. You glitter. Who knew? You were a perfect star, an incandescent beam illuminating, emasculating, imagine. Does your tongue still dampen when I tap your shoulder? Is it always an accident? My zipper is stuck. Can we move over to the... I smeared your face across the galaxy, but each day you became more and more like smoke. When he disperses into the air, he still needs to sit, settle somewhere. Last night I dreamed the shortest dream I'd ever dreamed. It was simple. You weren't in it. The next poem I'm gonna read to you guys is called Exit City, and this is about New Orleans, specifically about really pre and post Katrina, when they had the X's that were plastered all over the houses when they were doing checks on them. X a city. When the red X marks the spot in a smearing spray paint, the cries of the city begin. We too sing America, we sing in X's. X's on X's on X's. X's marking spots, marking houses. X's dripping, smeared with spray paint and sludge. X's and X's, tic-tac-toe. X's in red, X's in black. Houses look like fresh algae from the sky. Stumbling is not falling. Malcolm X. Gunshots translate into X, a sound we all knew pre and post Reconstruction. The thin X on a test. An adult movie store with 3 X's that no longer light up. A city X'd out on the power grid. New wood, new bricks, new shingles that cover up, no replace an old X. Did Dr. Seuss see X's? Never remembering a blue X, seeing houses flooded, Xing out the image, Xing out the houses. When X's come together, they shift into a picture. My version of a kaleidoscope. When everything is under water, I think of sea pyramids reflecting over each other in the distance. Thank you. The last piece I'm going to read is really, really short. And this one's called Celestial on the Topic of Unloving, featuring Minnie Riperton. And it was actually just published in this year's American Poetry Review in July-August issue. Today I kissed a stranger because the vibe was right. I felt his heart pulse through eye contact, and Lord, I got staring like la 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 la. Minnie keeps singing to me because your notes are almost as high as my. Stop reading, stop looking, stop. Pressed between a rock and masculinity is the hard place. You keep reading me. This boy feels like unpacking a new do-rag and finding a new way to lay my edges down. Make me keep loving you when it's not springtime, because your kiss sits in my stomach like a seed waiting to stick its roots into the ground. Springtime. Grow within me like all of the seasons, transcreating a universe just for 2. Because loving you feels like when Moses parted the Red Sea and the Israelites never knew God was planning to have goddesses pick out their afros and create rocket ships to pierce stratospheres, break down black holes, and fall in love with nameless stars just because God is right. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Matthew. Those were gorgeous. Next up, M'Bilia Meekers.
All right, y'all. Matthew, those were
Thank you, girl.
beautiful. Got a lot to follow up on. I'm going to read just a few poems. This one's called No One Really Dies in a Game. I burn your dead dog in the backyard. The soil chars and lifts like a cowhide I squeezed a blade beneath. I can't look. I want to believe the cartoon that told me as a kid, queers never die. Your mother hid a piece of us in the earth that turned into a white coal, and the smoke burned my nostrils, reached into my stomach like a shot of gin. And it reminds me of the summer we played together when I was 6. In the bright corner of your attic bedroom, I'd slip on your fuzzy slippers, undress your dolls, wait for you to press your lips against my cheek. In our imaginary house, I was always the daddy, watching you rock a stuffed animal to sleep. And then one day, we burned all the leaves in your backyard in a bucket of citronella, a ward against anything that would suck blood to the surface of our skin. Without you, I'm so sad. We watched the flames lick the metal red, had to call for help so your mother would put it out. Okay, the next one I'm going to read is called Muse Redaction. Mother won't tell me to mention sexuality, to put down my books so I won't have to look into all your faces. My blouses open into the arms of ghosts, and this mostly exposes the cold surface of mirror to the breasts. You say clothing is an odd set of containers for the limbs, a phoropter that clicks into the wrong prescription. And in the gallery, I mistake your portraits for bird shit, must wrap my wrists in something scarlet as directed. Often I forget ordinary blessings, rubbing the pad of my thumb against a contact lens, my boredom with being heartbroken. Your fingers in my mouth are always a solution if I'm gonna be the visionary of knives you want to neck. I want to laugh at the sliced sausages you pin to the white walls streaked with sweat. The blurred faces of meat curl into an everyday hurt that makes us wet. And in the blue-black of my bed, I swear I don't like you. I will not call you Muse. And then a little bit of a lighter poem, I guess. Auntie Mother Sings Against Body. A hetero wedding is where guests in their magical dresses wave a baby around the heads of a bride and groom. I never remember these things correctly and dislike children because they are sticky. What else can you call their small, weird paws webbed with anonymous eggy fluid? Most of the time, we're unborn or dead, I say to the good people of the subway station. It's true. Life is stupid, and the vampire on television says we imagine ourselves into existence. Scientists agree, and in the dream where I'm a drag king dancing to Prince, the audience throws severed plant genitals at me. I want to write my way out of ordinary violence, how every day matter congeals into our odd, squishy bodies that talk and smear spit on each other's faces. How I forget to thank the thunder and Louisiana warblers, the barber that twirls his mustache into glory, that icky bit of flesh that fell out of me, and the toilet that sluiced it to the sea. And then I just have one more. Ode to Leather. I could be another mammal, strapped into a harness, a living organ trapped in a cell of muscle. In you, I could be the whipped bull, the low moan bound to the throat, the horizon wrung out and left to hang on the fence post. You were my first armor against soil when tires bred small storms of burnt rubber and herds of bikers stripped down the road. What I want to know is how to stay suspended like a holler, like I'd done something awful enough to make the grass dry up, to chew the duvet down to feathers. Truth is, nothing really leaves the body and turns into a flogger. The cow's tail swishes and stings the flies. You lift me up, and my tusk cunt, a stitch in our pastoral, the mount and bridle for a body splayed wide as I flex my untanned hide. Thank you.
Whew. My goodness. Thank you, Beak. Those were great. I am next, and I'm just going to read two poems. One from Butcher Sugar, and then one a new one. So this is my 6th grade sex life. Melny Elementary, New Orleans. In class, boys passed sketches of tits. Mine drew laughs, a sideways pair of witches' hats. But I was smart, polite. Teachers loved me. Boys didn't trust me. Girls thought I was nice. I had a girlfriend, Susanna, the DA's daughter, and on weekends we made our sanctuary among trees at a nursery where we kissed between lovers' talks about death and sin. Walking back from church together, we held hands. Later, on my bedroom floor with my best friend John, listening to Kiss and looking at wrestling mags, I wanted to see John naked, especially his ass. John was the one who had told me about Scott getting caught with another kid doing a double blowjob, whatever that was. Wrestlers flexed and grappled. A double what? You know, John smirked, knowing I didn't. 69. Patient pornographer, he detailed the mechanics of the act. Why would Scott want to do that? And why hadn't he or John already shown or told me? Sinners die, Susanna would chide, my hand in her blouse. I hated everyone. My sex life was over. And this is a much more recent poem from a little earlier this year called Cinderella. 19, I liked how tank tops, tight jeans, cutoffs showed off my 100 push-ups, my lakeside runs. Drag's magic wasn't mine, but it dazzled when Dallas showed up to work a la Brooke Shields, his chunkier, broad-shouldered body beguiling as a girl I could get into. It was 1983. My world seemed small, tidy, divided into men's and women's, hits and misses. Dallas needed a wedding dress for a show he meant to win. So after the tip split and shift drinks and ones for the road, we waiters and busboys grabbed our go-cups and catwalked to the fancy resale shop next door. The owner, Dee's pal, had given him the key and her blessing for one night to try on whatever we wanted. Girl, you're gonna rip these seams, squealed Ray, tugging at the zipper that refused to budge another inch up Dee's back. God fucking damn, that was the one, Dee squirmed, shuffling off the brocade-coiled gown he'd scoped all week. Ray and the gang consoled him as they processed into realms of lesser dresses. I lingered, seduced by the gown that spurned Dee's girth, then stripped, stepped into the sheath, reached behind, zipped. You bitch, and you not even a queen. No, never outside those walls, but as my queens cooed, tugged, and turned me for a crowded mirror, I saw myself at 14, done up as Frankenfurter, a rocky horror party starlet, pert in thigh-highs, garters, and corset. And see, at 9, I'm the star of my solo closet dramas, raiding mom's walk-in when she goes out, some other body tingling under flowy rayon prints, prince, princess, so many suitors cloaked in their pursuits. Thank you.
All right, that leaves me.
Woohoo.
Just two things for you. The first one is from this new anthology that just came out. It's called Mother Mary Comes to Me, a pop culture poetry anthology, edited by Karen Head and Colin Kelly. They are both queer and they both live in Atlanta. This book is filled with a lot of their friends, which means a lot of Southern queers. So if you haven't had the opportunity to scope out Mother Mary Comes to Me, it's a good book, whether you're a religious person or a pop cultural person. I myself am a little of each. This poem is about the last time that I went to Thanksgiving in the Villages, which is a huge retirement community in the northern part of Florida. All my wife's in-laws live there. So yeah, it's filled with Jews from New York. Giving thanks at 70. Leo's wife is demented. After dinner, he plays the ukulele while Alvin's wife reflects on the story of how she was recently compelled to disown their second son. Everyone here has aged, and they sing along to Let It Be. At the bridge, Aubrey's wife interjects that McCartney was referring to his own mother, not the Virgin Mother. Doesn't matter, replied Joseph's wife in Long Islandese. People can take it how they want to take it. No one here whispers, as everyone here is a little deaf. Two of the wives can sing beautifully, and they harmonize by instinct. They proceed from memory and never find the words of wisdom lyric, always only remembering. There will be an answer. In my head, every time, then I have to sing, Let It Be. Otherwise, I feel something is just missing in my life. Okay, this is another anthology project, but this one is edited by me. Closet Cases, Queers on What We Wear. And check out this beautiful rainbow binding. It's an awesome coffee table book that contains photos and writing from 75 different contributors, all international, from all over the place, but many Southern writers, of course. And it is good for whatever your gender interests might be, whatever your fashion or style interests might be, and for any age. So if you are like desperate for presents for the 13-year-old in your life who is questioning and unusual and an outsider, this book is totally appropriate for them too. Okay, here is the picture that goes with my entry. Watchdog. Time is against us, is how most queers feel. We're always waiting for the other shoe. Even watching a polite and tidy sitcom like Will and Grace, I catch myself thinking, Jack's gonna get the shit beat out of him any day now. Or AIDS, or jail, or homelessness. I have two openly queer friends who work in high schools like I do. They both retired this year. That's you, Brad, by the way. The way we counted those days down, you'd think we were in NYC for NYE 1999. If you're queer and you finish out your career by natural means instead of getting fired, that's living the dream. The Timex Weekender is a cheap dial that makes a big sound. Tick, tick, tick. All the time. Time was coming hard for me and I started running. Worked faster, thought faster, stopped for no one. Accomplishments as far as the eye could see. This $10 watch ran me. I couldn't stand it. I gave the watch away after a few days after I put it on, by which time it had aged me several months. A lot of other things happened over many more moons and I survived them all. The person I am now meditates about 20 minutes a day, every day, tapping those ancestors. You know what they say? Tick, tick, tick. How precious it is to finally respect a few of one's elders. How invigorating to have lasted one more minute in this queer body, in this strange life. How brave to simply keep showing up, and how aggravating for the other bastards that one's accomplishments keep aggregating. Also accumulating are a diverse bunch of watch bands, because I ponied up another $10 to reclaim my Timex. The person I am now happily straps on this constant reminder to hold steady. Sometimes in a contentious meeting, my admin will sit back in his chair and I can almost see him calculating whether this is the hill that I die on. It never has been so far. And while he's in the hostile silence of the conference room, I'm telegraphing him that queer agenda. Tick, tick, tick.
Oh, yay. That was great. All of you were great. So, God, hard to follow up those good readings. So, panelists, I shared questions with you, and then I did this thing where I kind of revised them. So, ta-da! You'll have a little surprise coming up. Not too much. So let's deal first with like the biggest obvious thing here with our panel. What to you is particularly queer about the South? And what do being queer and Southern mean to you and your work?
You want to call on somebody, Brad?
I'm just doing a cake and eating style, but pretty soon I might have to. So.
I can start by saying an obvious thing. Being queer in the South means that I'm lucky to be white, because I lack some of the intersections that make it even more difficult to get around and hang out down here.
Yep.
It's true. I mean, part of me wants to say like it's hard, but it kind of comes with the territory. So it is hard. But at the same time, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like sometimes it's just hard to be yourself in this strange place that we live in. You know what I mean? Even though it's the queerest part of the country. And I don't know, I feel like it's taking that naturally queer, this queer air that we have, and using it in our work. You know what I mean? Like, it's authenticity, and it's taking that authenticity and bringing it to ourselves and putting it in our work. That's how I do it, and that's what it means to me.
Following up on that, I feel like for me, I feel like my ideas around queerness in the South are so contextualized in the fact that like I have been an out person outside of the South. So I feel like a lot of my ideas around queerness are also, and my like ideas around like being Southern outside of the South are about like being misunderstood. And somehow that being tied to like a very deeply rooted homesickness, if that makes any sense. So in all the ways that it can be challenging to be queer in the South, like there's like almost like a longing for home for me, and a feeling of like unrest and just feeling like very odd in my body. And I feel like that like influences my poetry as well. And like just like the weirdness of having a body and then it being far from home.
Right now, I'm reading Jane Eyre with my 10th graders, and as I'm reflecting on Victorian culture with them, which is so constrained around politeness and keeping up of appearances and not wanting to rock the boat or give offense, I'm constantly reminded, with these kids who live in the north suburbs of Atlanta, they see ways that Victorian culture is still part of what's in the water in Southern culture, as far as, the strictness of social guidelines and conventions for interacting with people you know and people you don't know. And so there's just there are some certain subgroups or subcultures in America, Southerners being one of them, that are just very tightly constrained. I think, not that I have spent much time among the extremely wealthy people in the United States, but I suspect also there's some conventions about politeness and keeping up appearances among super rich people, similar to the way there are like regionally in the South. And I think a reason that queers struggle, maybe particularly in the South, is because in queer culture, we have the opposite type of normativity, right? That our norms are to get turned up to 11, to be the most fierce and most fabulous. And it's just, a much louder and out approach to of being in the world, compared to what you are expected to do in the South.
Mhm.
Yeah, and thinking about what it is that makes the South itself particularly queer. um, you know, there is, for me, a sense of extremes, which like connects somewhat with what you're describing, Megan, but like extremes of celebration, right? So, we have Mardi Gras, but also like the way people celebrate sports and the way people celebrate holidays. I mean, it can be pretty extreme. And of course, extremes of violence in the South that are, a part of experience, a part of history. So like, yeah, there is that version of Southern culture that we think of that is very polite and constrained, but I feel like that is so interestingly connected to this world of extremes. We didn't even bring up the weather. But thoughts about that?
Undergirding that has to be an appreciation of campiness too, right? Because like there's nothing that is not gay about a Mardi Gras parade. Nothing.
No.
Not half-naked men flinging beads all over the place, not tiny puppies in costumes on parade floats. Everything about it is super like Sontagian campy in a classic sense, you know what I mean? And the average Southerner failing to acknowledge that as a reality is absurd and kind of funny in and of itself, I think. Just an unself-awareness in Southern culture that's caused by this deeply anxious approach to politeness, I think is costing us something down here.
Yes.
Yeah, and I feel like I actually, like, in my notes while I was prepping for this panel, like put down like, being in the South is very like an all or nothing experience, which I think speaks to what you were saying, Brad, in terms of extremes. Like it feels like it's even if you're just like talking about like the landscape and the weather, like it's a full body experience. Like when it rains, it really, really rains. When it's hot, like you are sweating out every part of your body. Like and I feel like being queer in the South is very similar. Like you're like doing it to an extreme, or there's like also like thinking back on like the Victorian nature of like Southern culture. Like I keep thinking of like a combination of like sass and charm. Like what comes to mind is bless your heart, which like if you're outside of the South, they think that's a real nice thing to say. But it feels that phrase in particular also seems very queer to me. It'd be like, bless your heart. Like there's something very charming about it, but it's also sassy, but it's also like loving in a very particular way, but also calling you out on your BS. Like there's something about that particular phrase that seems like the epitome of like queer Southern language.
Yes, I love that.
I think also because so much of Southern language is predicated on things that got stolen from, more Black cultural language. And queer culture is as guilty of appropriating Black culture as Southern culture, for sure. Like the entire ballroom scene is predicated on Black and Latinx folks, right? So I think our failure to acknowledge that that's a thing is something that queer culture has very much in common with Southern culture in terms of language.
But also too, like we have this thing where it's like everything's like very don't ask, don't tell in every way. You know what I mean? Like that's an extreme that we live in too. Even where it's just like, if you want to be visibly queer, you know what I mean? I'm like trying to find the most proper way to do it because it's like, can I read? Because everything about the South is so proper. You know what I mean? So it's just like now I'm trying to properize my queerness. It's not even a word, but it's just like I'm trying to find this way to deal with the extremes while standing in them too. You know, it's interesting, but it's all polarizing.
Yeah, and what you're saying is like that's kind of like maybe why we need extremes like Mardi Gras, so that you can put your queerness inside of a costume that's going to be completely normal for one day when everybody is queer. Right?
On the one day.
Everybody and everything for that one day. Yeah.
It's like a bonus Halloween.
Yeah.
You know, it is that safe holiday to be as gay as you want, and nobody's going to say boo to you about it.
Yeah, and Halloween is way more queer in the South than it is anywhere else, I think. I was also, the business about language is really interesting to me too, because I feel like, what am I trying to say? That like the experience of language in the South, like we're so aware that the way we speak is distinct from other parts of the country. And of course, other people remind us of that too. And yeah, you know, like my parents, when my dad went to grad school in Colorado, like they just erased their accents because they got tired of people saying things like, "Oh, say apple pie again." But I think that attention to the sound of language and how people say what they say and the implications of language, like thinking about "bless your heart" again. Yeah, it informs a lot of what made me a poet, I think. Maybe some of that stuff will come back up again. That was all really great. So another like kind of obvious thing for us to talk about, and I had two questions on this when I sent them out, and I've just reduced it to one, is politics. Yuck. So we've just had an election.
What yuck? I live in Georgia.
Oh my
Game
God. Yes.
on, motherfuckers.
Come through, Georgia. Okay.
Yes.
What you need?
Oh my God. So, as you may know, we've just had an election. So we're once again talking in terms of red states and blue states, as though these were in fact meaningful realities and not just creations of the Electoral College. I have often felt especially frustrated by certain, usually liberal, usually white, non-Southerners who very disdainfully view the South as a monolith and will sometimes even joke, not joke, "I wish they would just secede. That would make everybody's life so much easier." I think a queer perspective on all this can be a really useful corrective. So, from a queer perspective, what misperception about the South would you most want to correct for non-Southerners? Should Georgia speak first?
I'm happy to. Look, all across the South, there are three things that get Democrats elected. One of those, they all start with M. It's nice and easy to remember. One is the expansion of Medicaid and Medicare. The more people that we get health insurance for, the safer we are, right? And that's not just in pandemic times, that's all the time. So the first thing is people vote because they want their healthcare protected. Second thing is marijuana. Marijuana is a issue that has bipartisan support, and the legalization of marijuana will turn out lots of voters who don't care about much because they think it doesn't affect them. But all my neighbors smoking weed, all the hillbillies out in the mountains, they care about that, and they will drive 30 miles to go and vote for that. They don't mind, and they might as well vote for whoever else is on there while they're at it, whoever's policy that is, okay? Medicaid, marijuana, and the third thing is minimum wage. Because queers oftentimes don't get good employment, particularly in the South. We're widely discriminated against. So making $7.50 at McDonald's instead of $15 at McDonald's, that makes a huge difference in our individual lives as gay people. So those three M's, people all over the place care about that, but especially those things affect queers in the South. And if more Democrats would run on those issues, they would see the voter turnout that they deserve.
Brilliant. Yes.
Brad, I was thinking about this question, and all I could think about was like, I feel like I have less that I want to say to white, non-Southern liberals in particular about the South than I want them to understand like the region where they are and its history. Like that's the part that infuriates me. There's like kind of like an uppity attitude about the South and talking about the South and the problems of the South as if it's only in the South and it doesn't exist anywhere else. Like, have you been to New York City? The neighborhoods are really segregated.
Have you been to Portland, child?
Like, let's talk about Oregon.
Let's talk about Oregon, okay?
It's literally a white mecca. Like, literally, that's why it was founded. It was supposed to be a white utopia. Like, it's very frustrating to me. Like, I don't want to hear anything about the South from someone who hasn't thoughtfully considered their own history, their own region, and like took that into account before talking to me about the problems of the South. The South is honest about its history and it acknowledges that. So I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, no, preach. Some of these are nationwide problems, right? Some of these are like voter suppression problems that need nationwide solutions. But what you're talking about is so correct. Like, as Southerners, we should say to Ohio, we should say to Oregon, mind your biscuits. We're handling our business down here and you handle yourself because you have trouble in your own backyard.
Yeah. And I just need people to also understand, like racism is not mutually exclusive to the South. Like it permeates the very being of the whole entire nation that we're living in, and it always has. So it's like, once we kind of get through that, it's like you can kind of move on with it. But we have to also acknowledge the fact that that is the elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And connecting that to what B was talking about the South's awareness of history. Yeah, that's why we fight a lot about it, right? I mean, and I think people elsewhere do not fully appreciate the fact that they bought wholesale the lost cause narrative, right? Like that was promulgated post-Reconstruction, and then it became what everybody in the United States was taught about the Civil War and after the Civil War. And it led to Jim Crow becoming the nation's written and unwritten law. So yeah, I would like people who live outside of the South to be as urgently concerned about history and what we need to learn from it as we are all the time.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that as a visibility issue is one of the reasons we are so good at understanding how racism influences American politics and the electoral season generally is because we count people in the census based on their race. We have data to explain where different folks of different colors live in America and behaviors that are associated with those races, right? We know, for example, that most Black folks vote Democratic, right? So it's easy to target Black folks because they're counted on the census, job applications, every questionnaire you got, colleges and universities, everybody wants to know what race you are. But if they would put questions on all those same forms that counted queer people, then we would be targeted probably to the same extent as other demographic groups, because as queers, we are not counted, right? If we were counted, I think we would learn that discrimination against us is just as prevalent and just as easy to put targets on our back as any other demographic group that does have more statistical evidence to verify who they are and where they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's the downside of visibility, right? Is if they spot us, then they can round us up.
which is so interesting considering, again, numbers. 28% of queers voted for Trump in this election. So I think, I think getting queers to be honest about, what members of our community actually stand for would be a good discussion to have too, so that I don't know, I feel like the queer community sometimes likes to see itself as a monolith in terms of the things we all believe in. This is our church. And I was like, oh, no. Yeah.
That's just your basic intersectionality problem that we've always
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a microcosm of the larger problem that we're all dealing with.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to take us in a different direction. And this was a question I didn't show you in advance. Oh my God. And also, I'll just go ahead and say we've got about 14 minutes. So if there's anyone in the audience who's got questions, please put them into the chat for us so we can have some time for those. What, if anything, did growing up queer in the South teach you about love?
I just wrote a book about it, LOL. Truthfully, I think B said something that was interesting earlier. She said, like, I got to be queer, like, outside of the South. And I think for me, it's like, I'm thankful I got to have the experience both in and out of it to understand it. But it taught me a lot. I mean, it taught me how to love myself more than it did to really think about like what I thought I wanted out of love when it came to people. If that makes sense. It was this weird similar thing of like trying to find home and having that like homesickness attached to like what I was looking for in love, like looking for attachment in people and in things. But then like I had to realize like my roots here, like to New Orleans, or what made me me. And that is how I was able to start to learn how to love myself. It taught me more about self-love than anything.
Because if you can't love yourself, how are you
how
going
you
to love anybody?
Right, Megan.
I actually didn't grow up queer in the South. I grew up queer on the north side of Chicago. And what my dad said to me when I came out is instructive as far as love or any subject matter, really. He said, I don't care what you are, but I'm just disappointed on your behalf because your life's going to be so much harder now.
Thanks, Dad.
Can you believe that? I thought of a lot of things he might say, but that wasn't something that I had thought of. But he was right. Not to be disappointed in that, because I'm a person who loves struggle, who loves to be in the front lines, who is happy to be a joyful warrior, so the disappointment part, not so much, but the idea that this does make our lives harder in a certain way, that when we love, we have to fight harder for that love. My wife and I have been together for 15 years, but she wasn't always lawfully my wife. The first time we got married, we just threw a big party because that was all we could do, Right.
Yeah.
I think a lot about the expansiveness and fluidity of love. That's, I think, the one major lesson. Go big or go home. You've got to basically you don't know what the future is going to bring at all, but especially in terms of queerness, what queers are allowed to do in the world legally or not. So if it's really YOLO carpe diem, you got to do it now. You've got to do it to the most of your ability. And that's more than just romantic love, right? We have familial love and the queer concept of the word family. The thinking of like communities, like there's so much, it's a very inclusive feeling, like being queer in the South, thinking about love. Like it's everyone. You can build your own community, and you do it and do it big.
If anything, there's this big family aspect from Southern people, especially Black people, you know what I mean? But it's like that whole aspect of family. I wrote something, and I said, when I grew up in the home that I grew up in, I often felt the love, but I also felt all of the conditions that it came with.
Yep.
And I feel like if there's anything, there's this level of unconditional love that we have as queer people that we're just able to give from that understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was thinking about this question, I was also thinking in terms of community. And I was having a conversation with Elizabeth Gross just the other day about this. And she reminded me that pretty much any intentional idea of community is kind of queer, because it is not the paradigm of the family unit, right, as the essential unit, which is, if you want to look at it in the most Marxist way, it's about separating yourself from other people and producing more bodies that can perform labor. And we find all kinds of interesting ways to make community and all kinds of urgent reasons that we have to make community, and it can be from anything like starting a gay Mardi Gras crew and taking that very fucking seriously, thank you, to, having to provide health services for people living with HIV/AIDS, or, all those kinds of things.
This is also a place where I think my nominee for most intentional community in the South is the Black church, right? So I think this is also an area where queers have kind of cribbed from folks that have been working on it way longer than we have got our act together in the United States, right? Yeah, that's another thing that I think we received and figured out how to make work for us, rather than I don't think we invented intentional communities.
No. I didn't mean to suggest that. No, but yeah, I agree. Yeah. I'm not seeing any questions from our audience members. Come on, dive in.
We have one from Candace.
Yay! Candace says, I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on gender roles in the South, and how those roles play into your Southern experience and your writing. Great question. Can I start with that one, since one of my poems dealt with that? That was so fun. That was so fun to get to experience as a 19-year-old, going into this fancy vintage dress shop and getting to just play. So that's not an experience that is necessarily exclusive to the South, but there was something particularly New Orleans about it. And it's and the fact that I just went from work with the people I was working with, it's okay, let me just go next door and we do that. It was all this seamless thing. That was sort of marvelous. And feeling like it was okay, at least in that moment, for it to be fluid for me. I could really, it was safe. And I feel like there were opportunities for that play was growing up in the South, in New Orleans in particular.
I have a poem that I wrote called Blow that's actually from the perspective of a trans girl. I like playing with gender roles. I do this thing where I like to do persona poems too, and I often take on the voice of like a woman. It always like I just like to think about what life would be like from a different perspective often. I think it gives me like a degree of separation from my work sometimes, but then also like it allows me to really see what I want the purpose of it to be. Like through like deconstructing like what I think about gender and what I don't think about it often. I'm able to really just like kind of just I'm able to really just think about life as life instead of like what it really is like as like a cis man, you know, or like what it's like as a woman or like what it's like as a trans person, you know. It's just I like the fluidity of it.
I feel like when I think about like gender roles and gender presentation in my work, I often think about like, I guess it shows up in my work as me being very frustrated with like cis hetero norms of what women's gender roles are. I feel like that's how it shows up the most. And then also like play in that. One thing that I really like about being a writer who's also queer and attracted to multiple genders is that like if I have a you in my poem, that could be a person of any gender, unless there's specific context clues that make you like read it one way or the other or another way entirely. Like I think a lot about that. I'm not sure exactly how that would relate to my experience being a Southerner, but I guess that's kind of what's going around in my head.
It has some relationship to privilege, I think. I'm a female who identifies as gender nonconforming, but as far as how I fit into gender roles in the South, like not only am I picking up privilege points for whiteness, which is a characteristic I actually possess, but in my nonconformity to gender roles, I'm also picking up masculinity privilege points, right? And so, you know, like I don't necessarily identify as butch, but that's a label that gets put a lot of the time. It's true that I would never be caught dead in a dress, you know? And so there are some characteristics I have that kind of overlap with that community. And as a result, sometimes based on gender roles in the South, I get treated really quite nicely because they just treat me like a boy, not like a man, but like, at least like a boy, right? And so I do get some of that. And I do my best to kind of let that work against the system to put me in a position where I am more able to, you know, get my elbow in there and stomp on the cracks to make them a little wider. It doesn't always work out. But then the reverse of that is if you are looking to police traditionally feminine gender roles, I can't pass, it doesn't fly. So then I just get called, you know, like all the same things Hillary Clinton gets called, right? Then I'm just like an ambitious bitch who doesn't know her place and things like that. So sometimes it cuts against me, but I think I do often pick up those masculinity privilege points too, because of the way Southern culture views gender.
That is so interesting, and you just made me realize something I'd never thought about before. Oh my God! Which is that for gay men in the South, like it's so weird that as you get older, because most of us have not had families, we don't have children, you know, so we don't have those stereotypical heteronormative roles to fit into. We still get treated like children, even as we get older, in ways that other male members of our families don't get treated.
And also gay culture encourages that and is complicit with that to a certain extent, because if you could all stay 25 and look like Peter Pan all the time, then that's like what you're taught is the ideal to a certain extent in the gay male community, right?
Yeah, there is that. Yeah, that's so interesting. I hadn't really ever thought about the fact that,
I mean, and then there's also the passing aspect between communities too, you know what I mean? Because there's shit that I really can't do sometimes when I'm around my straight Black friends, you know? It's like, so there are a lot of overlaps.
All right. We're getting told here. This was great, you guys. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we could do this. Clearly, we could talk for another hour at least. But I'm now going to throw it back to Megan, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, Brad, yeah, that panel, you knocked it out of the park with your curation of this event. Thank you so much for this conversation. I honestly forgot I was running a festival because I got so engrossed in what was happening. But in 15 minutes, you will be treated to the keynote event, which is local writers Jarvis DeBerry and Kelly Harris DeBerry doing a joint book launch for their books Freedom Knows My Name and I Feel to Believe. They will be joined on stage by interviewer Megan Braden Perry, who is a local journalist and has a book out about snowballs, which are all delicious and we love them. And if you like what you saw, if you like what you're about to see, don't forget to support us on PayPal, wordsandmusicnola@gmail.com. Text WHAM20 to 44321. And also go to the comments on both Facebook and YouTube and just click the tiny URL. Thank you guys so much. I will see you again in 15 minutes. And don't forget to go buy those books at Tubby and Coos with our virtual bookstore. Thank you so much.